Hey, it's Chuck. If you grew up in a house where something clearly happened, but nobody would talk about it, then this one's for you. Let's dive into it. Yesterday, I talked about the generation that was punished for speaking their own language and that how many of those survivors went on to raise children without teaching them a single word of that language. Today, I want to name what that silence actually was because it wasn't indifference and it wasn't peace. Dr. Eduardo Duran, a clinical psychologist and founder of Seventh Direction Psychotherapy in Bozeman, Montana, coined a term for what he saw in decades of clinical work with Native communities. He called it soul wound. That's a trauma passed down not just through story, but through actual felt sense that a family carries into every room that it enters. Dr. Duran's clinical work found that the silence in these families wasn't an absence of pain. It was actually the pain, and it was still active. It was just taking on a different form. Dr. Karina Walters, an enrolled citizen at the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, who now directs the Tribal Health Research Office at the National Institute of Health and co-founded and directed the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute at the University of Washington for over 2 decades, found something that gave Dr. Duran's clinical observation really hard data. Her research developed what she calls the Indigenous stress coping model, and it found that the symptoms of historical trauma tracked closely with family silence around the original trauma. The less a family spoke about what happened, the more the next generation showed physiological stress responses to things that on the surface looked completely unrelated. So essentially, a child doesn't need to be told the details of a boarding school to inherit the aftermath of one. They just need to grow up in a house where a certain kind of quiet settles in every time the subject gets close, or where grandparents face changes and nobody explains why, or where certain words just simply never used. Silence like that isn't protection the way it was intended to be. It was meant to spare the next generation from carrying the weight directly, but what it actually does is hand them the weight anyway, minus any context that would help them understand where it came from or why it's there. This is why so many people raised in families like this describe feeling like something's wrong before they can even name what it is, because the feeling's always there, but there's just no explanation for it. Naming it now, that doesn't undo the original harm, but it does give the person carrying it somewhere to finally put it down instead of just holding something traumatic that they were never told the name of. I'm Chuck, the bald therapist. Work on you. Take no bullshit, especially from the silence that untold trauma brings. Remember that you matter, and have a gentle rest of your day.